Thank you very much. Good morning once again. My name is Prabhashini Subrayan Naidu. I am a commissioner at the Commission for Gender Equality. I am deployed to the province of KwaZulu-Natal. This morning, I've been tasked with moderating the next panelist, which we're going to focus on gender, education, and training. Forming part of the panelists is Dr. Mzikazi Nduna, Professor Grace Kuno, and we have received an apology from Ms. Norma Pakude, but in her absence and representing her will be Ms. Naledi Joy. Thank you very much, panelists, for being with us here today. Colleagues, the next topic for discussion is a very sensitive, it's a very prevalent subject, and it has to deal with sextortion in the education and training phase. Sexual violence in the education system in South Africa has deep roots in the country's history, stemming from broader societal issues of inequality. This system created a culture of violence against the marginalized and the vulnerable. Sexual violence is not solely experienced at basic education level, but has extended to higher education, where the phenomenon has been experienced by both learners and staff. Sex for marks and sex for jobs. The panel before you today will engage on these matters in the education and training sector. I'm going to ask the panelists to commence by giving us an introductory remark, and then we'll go on to an in-depth discussion, followed by questions and answers. Thank you. Can we then start with you, Professor, and then we'll move along. Thank you.
Thank you. We wanted her to start, but it's fine. Thank you. Thank you. Dumelang. How long do I have? How long do I have? 15 minutes?
No, we are having introduction remark. 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Have you ever seen a professor speak for 3 minutes? Okay, so I want to firstly start by acknowledging the work that the CGE continues to do. It sets the foundation for our continued engagement. I also want to acknowledge that in the work that they do, they center research knowledge, and this is significant for policy and liberatory work on gender equality. The CEO spoke to multiple quantitative numbers on where we are in the world on gender equality. These numbers illustrate some shifts, but also some questions. The qualitative issues on gender equality or gender inequality are more challenging, as many who should be doing the work to address gender equality continue to use the language of freedom and equality, but they fail to actually do what needs to be done to achieve this equality. Why is this? My paper looks at some of the visible yet hidden reasons why, especially Black women, remain invisible in the South African higher education system. And I focus on Black women for a particular reason. It's very deliberate, because we come from a racist history, and this racist history continues. And we see this manifest in the higher education space. So 30 years after democracy, 68 years since the march, the 1956 march, we should be celebrating, we should be having nice conversations, we should be happy. But unfortunately, we sit in a context where equality, I mean, the chair spoke to the limitation of the equality clause in the Constitution. But then we see this limitation not only in the Constitution, but in everyday life. We see it in the higher education sector, where Sithole, who's a liberatory writer, argues that freedom, justice, and equality cannot be understood outside of the idea of race. Because white supremacy is structurally positioned to propagate white sensitivity and to pontificate white norms. That's why in my talk I will not center just women, but I will center black women. Because race and racism continues in how black women are positioned, not only in the higher education sector, but in the world in general. The CGE Equality Report, the 2024 Equality Report, argues that, and it still shows that women experience challenges with access to land ownership. They continue to have high financial exclusion, low unemployment numbers, poor access to technology, and gender stereotypes. Some of the other issues that emerge from this report include that women experience sexual harassment in the workplace, gender-based violence, and discrimination. We see the same things in the higher education sector. Because of these issues, the CGE report illustrates that gender inequality will only be achieved in 131 years. So many of us will be dead by that time. And that's why we must fight and continue fighting. This means that women and men will only be economically equal in 169 years. Economic equality is important. If you don't have access to money, you can't buy food, you can't pay school fees, you can't leave an abusive man. The report also says that we will only achieve educational equality in 16 years. Education for girls and women is an important determinant for long life, for safety, and for access to economic empowerment. So although 16 years to educational equality looks better than 169 years to economic equality, the challenge women, and especially black women in particular, are experiencing in the higher education sector are not encouraging. Doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. For example, in the first quarter of 2023, the UNESCO ASALEC report stated that gender inequality in the higher education sector was a universal challenge, especially when looking at women in leadership. In the South African case, this is visible not only in university administrative leadership, but it is true also in who leads the academic project. That is, who is the professoriate and who leads knowledge production, who's the researcher. That is, and also who holds research chairs. Research still shows that these positions are held by men, and particularly white men, and most recently, these numbers have increased for black men and for white women. Black women remain underrepresented in these higher education leadership spaces. The gender numbers for university leadership in South Africa at vice-chancellor level are obvious. We have 26 universities, and only 6 of those are currently held by women. Mangolotti and Kuno 2024 argue that since 1994, there have only been 14 women vice-chancellors out of 156 opportunities. That is, we have 26 universities times 6 5-year terms. We could have appointed 156 women if we wanted, but we haven't, because we don't want. The University of Natal, now the University of KwaZulu-Natal, was the first to appoint a female vice-chancellor, Professor Brenda Gowley in 1994, followed by the University of Cape Town in 1996, when they appointed the first black female vice-chancellor, Dr. Mamphela Ramphela. Most universities still have not once appointed a female vice-chancellor, and those that had one have not replaced them with a female vice-chancellor, except the University of Zululand, which had 2 female vice-chancellors, Professor Rachel Gumbi, 2003, and Professor Fizile Mazibuko, 2010. Before the current female vice-chancellor, Professor Xoliswa Mtose, 2016, currently serving her second term. Of the 6 current female vice-chancellors, 3 are serving their second term and 3 are in their first term. In 2023, we had, for the first time, 7 female vice-chancellors. Unfortunately, this was short-lived, as UCT Vice-Chancellor Professor Mamokgethi Phakeng was forced to step down before the end of her second term. Tracking back, of the 14 female vice-chancellors since 1996, only a few were able to serve more than 2 terms. And some have been forced to step down before the end of their term. I'm going to stop here because I had 3 minutes, and then the conversation will continue. Ke a leboga.
Thank you, Prof, for being such a diligent presenter this afternoon and panelist. I'm now going to invite Dr. Nduna to give us some opening remarks, and followed by Ms. Joy, where we will then go into an interactive session. Doc, you can remain seated. There's a mic. You don't have to. Oh, you have a mic.
Okay, thank you very much. So I was thinking that I'll have to follow Prof. Kuno and move to the podium. So thank you very much for the invitation to speak. I will open with a few words. And I want to start off by assuming that at least in this room, we have a collective agreement because of the work that we do. And I'm also acknowledging that we come from different perspectives when we look at the work of gender equality and equity. However, at least we do understand in this room that educational institutions, and these institutions start from nurseries, schools, colleges, and universities, are an extension of other institutions in the society. So educational institutions are an extension of the family. If in the family we do not form the foundation of gender equality, it's going to be very difficult for the kids to go to nursery school and start respecting girls in the nursery school. They are the extension of our churches. If our churches do not address gender equality within the church, it's going to be very difficult for people to come out of a church on a Monday morning and come and say something different in their workplaces or at school. They are an extension of all other public spaces. So if the taxi rank does not respect women, and women go through the taxi rank every day in the full view of everyone, men, women, gay men, lesbian women, and there is differential treatment and sexism, which we see every day in these public spaces, then we cannot hope that when they enter the gate of an institution, which is an educational institution, then they will start to behave differently towards the very same person that they were nasty to at the public space before they entered the gates of the institution. So I think that is one of the things that we need to think about when we talk about education and as a system, and educational institutions as physical or sociological spaces that are occupied in very gendered ways. And I know that we have been doing this work for a very long time, and we follow on the struggles, the strides, and the successes of those who came before us. And with the work that we do, we also craft a pattern for those who come after us. And that is why it is important that we are mindful of the pattern that we are trying to craft when we do work on gender equity, equality, and gender-based violence. And that is why I said earlier, I am mindful that we come from different perspectives, and I'm hoping that in this conference, we'll be able to talk about the different perspectives that we come from, because they inform the interventions that we are putting so much resources into, and what the outcome of these resources and interventions will be. So those who come after us may or may not follow this pattern depending on the context of their struggles. But I think it's important that we go back and think about where is the role and the position of feminist values in this work, because quite a lot of the work that we do in the space of gender in the education sector, it seems, has lost the values of feminism. And that is why we are able to produce so many learned people, even today, who still come to this conference and say, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and invisibilize people who are gender non-conforming and trans. It's because we've been doing the education the whole time, but we're not infusing that into the education system. And I think it's high time that we think about where did we lose the feminist values. And that is why we come to a gender conference and we still talk about the gift of men to women, right? It's because we're not doing the gender education from a political, feminist, principled perspective. And those are the things that we need to bring back into our education system, I think. So why do we still make these what some people might think are small mistakes, because these are not small mistakes. If you stand here and you greet ladies and gentlemen, there's a group of people that you have not greeted, right? So it can't be a small mistake on those people. If you stand here and prophesy a gift of men to women, there are people who are feeling excluded in that because they have not been gifted with that gift. And in fact, what some people think is a gift, it has been a nemesis for many. We got here and we stay in this position because the biggest mistake that we made in 1994 was to think that everybody's understanding of human rights includes gender rights. And it doesn't. Human rights are human rights, and the way that human rights have unfolded, they have centered a human in human rights. And a human in our society is a person known as a man. So because they've centered a man, the human rights approach to gender work has failed us. We respect, we accept that it's important for us to advance human rights, but we need to always do a very fine-tooth comb analysis when we deal with human rights, because most of the time, human rights are less about gender rights, and in particular, less about women's rights and genderqueer people's rights. And that's the education that I think we need to go back to. So I'm going to divert a bit from education and go to my recent encounter, which probably half of the people in this room have experienced, because I know you are travelers for one reason or the other. So last week I was traveling home, and you know this scenario where you have that small bag, right? And then there is an attendant who's carrying pink slips at the airline that I was flying with. I don't know the color, maybe it's different from each airline. So one of the cheapest low-cost airlines has pink slips. And without looking at the passengers, we are outside, we've left the airport, we are on the way to the aircraft. You know that scenario, right? And then they're busy with the bags, and when it was my turn, she goes, good day, sir, what's your seat number? Right? She's doing this, it's automatic, it's her work, she's doing it every day. And why is she saying good day, sir? Because travelers are men. Because the airplane is for business people. And because we've trained them, and even in their training in aviation, they center a man. So the business person would be a man. So they automatically know that when they greet passengers, they should say, good day, sir, until they look at you and they realize that, in fact, you may not be a sir, and so they need to apologize. So why is it that we live our lives with apologies every day? You will remember that before 1994, I've got 60 seconds, and you will remember that before 1994, laptops were not a thing, right? And then after that, laptops started to be a thing in the business sector, and people were carrying laptops. And airlines then added the laptop bag. You know that, right? Right? So we used to carry two items, a suitcase and a purse. Men used to carry a suitcase and just walk through. Now we added a laptop bag. So men could still carry a suitcase, a laptop bag, and we were able to carry a suitcase, a laptop bag, and a purse. Until 30 years later, when we started to celebrate the gains of human rights, and some airline that I'm not going to mention, which has some beautiful pink colors, started to cancel the item that only is applicable to women. Why do we do that? And then when you inquire, it is the gender. It is the policy, sorry. Why? Because in our education, in our training, we still do not center women when we train and educate about policies at work. And therefore, we go along with gender-blind policies. Gender-blind policies that can, in the wake of, any day you can decide you're going to cancel that which matters to a particular group of people only. It doesn't matter to men. And it's because you have centered men in your policy. So we encounter these behaviors and many, many, many behaviors that in your everyday life, when you look through the gender lens, you will see that a woman is excluded in how we train and educate people and service providers. So the education system does not necessarily create gender inequality. It does, in fact, reproduce what already exists in the society because it is part of the society. It reproduces and it continues to recreate in different forms. And the culture of violence against women and queer people fits perfectly in the education system as an extension of the society. I want to close off by then saying it would be impossible for us to view nurseries, schools, colleges, and universities that are violent-free, if the same is not achieved in the broader society. People can then try to carry themselves in the best ways possible, but there is no way that for 12 years when you enter a school premise, you will be a different person from that which you are when you leave at 2 p.m. to go back to your community. So we need to think about this in terms of what is the position of the education system within the broader society. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Ms. Joy, can I have your opening remarks?
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, everyone. My name is Naledi Joy. I am a gender officer for the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation. So I will move a bit from what Prof and Doc have spoken about in terms of higher education, but mine is a focus on basic education. So the story I hope to tell during the interactive session is on two insights from a research that we did, one in the Eastern Cape, Lusigisigi, and another one in Alexandra, Johannesburg. And what I will be answering there is how do we understand the experiences of violence, the experiences of victims, and approaches that rely to coming forward. And then the second one will be looking at what structural and systematic mechanisms are in place which enable the secrecy of perpetrators. I think I share the same sentiment as Doc when she said that a school is an extension of society. And as someone who has recently come out of school, I will definitely say it's hard to behave differently in school when you have already another socialization at home. So CSVR has been doing this work for 3 decades now. Our biggest route is we're trying to understand the forms of violence, and we highlight that there's a need to consider GBV as intricately entangled with other forms of criminal and state violence, as well as structural and physical violence, which I will be addressing in the second point, which speaks to what structural and systematic mechanisms are in place which enable the secrecy of perpetrators. Because of how you're looking at me, I will cut it short here, and I'll say more during the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go right into the discussion. Gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa is a pandemic. And it's no doubt a pandemic that starts in our homes, later on in our schools with teenage pregnancies, and then later on in higher education. So this panel here today, let us engage on the abuse of power through sextortion, which relies on an illicit act being kept a secret. Doc, I want to start with you. Let us discuss this. The abuse of power through sextortion relies on the illicit act being kept a secret.
Okay, it's fine. Thank you very much. So I stand on the fence on this comment that that the abuse of power remains a secret. I stand on the fence. I think what is happening is, yes, at the face value, we might see that the perpetration of sexual harassment, sexual abuse and exploitation, or sextortion, as they put it at this conference today, is a secret. But I want to say that the secrecy of the perpetrator is actually not so secret, because at least one or more people always know about the behavior. The first person who knows is the perpetrator. So the fact that they know means that at least it is out there, because they know themselves. They know that they are perpetrators of violence. That is why in my next invitation, CGE, because this is the first conference and we're going to have another one next year, I really want to... Didn't they say that earlier this morning, or is it me? Sorry. Oh, I want to come back. Okay, if you don't invite me next year, please make sure that
Doc
we're-
is already planning the agenda for next year. But yeah.
Okay.
We're
If you
taking
don't
notes.
invite me next year, Prabhashini, please make sure that men who work in the space of gender-based violence talk in these conferences, not about their role in preventing violence against women, but about their role in preventing themselves from violating women.
Yeah.
Right? Because they know that they are the perpetrators. You know when you do something nasty to the next person. You know when you want them to feel the pain. You know when you're being vindictive. Like we all know, right? To our friends, to our family, to our children. We know and we wait and we're like, I'm going to do this and I know how she's going to feel or he's going to feel. So it's not like they don't know this. But there's also another person who knows. It's the survivor or the victim. So this is not secret because there's a second person now who knows about this behavior. However, what then the perpetrator does, not as an individual, what the perpetrator as a collective, as a community of people who have a pact among themselves in how they treat women, what they do then is to make women not talk about their experiences of abuse. Because if they talk about their experiences of abuse, of sextortion, of exploitation, then the very same group of people that we call men, they know what their strategy is to deal with her when she has spoken about it. So patriarchy does that. Patriarchy silences people. So when students sleep for marks, yeah, when students sleep for a room at res, when students sleep for a position in the SRC, when students have sex for all these things, they do feel that they do want to talk about it. They see the gender power dynamics. But it's very difficult for them to talk because they know what the comeback will be. It will be even stronger than what you are talking about. So you're talking out against 66%, right? The next thing you're going to fail, right? So they know that the response will be even more damning and stronger. And that is why it's very difficult for victims and survivors to talk about this. We know, all of us here, who in our universities, now I'm going to go to the university because I lectured at some point. We know who slept with postgraduate students because they were their PhD supervisors. We know who slept with honor students who were going to apply for a master's program that was very competitive. We know who slept with junior lecturers because they were going to facilitate their promotion to being senior lecturers and professors. We know these people, so it is not secret. However, we choose to not talk about it because, one, we need to protect our jobs. We all here for our families. And if we start to talk against a system that we found here, and we get told all the time that, this is not new, you found this here, and you're going to leave it here, they tell us. So you've got to protect your job. Not only you are protecting your job because you're going to lose your job, but you're also protecting something very important in this society which needs to be dealt with, called references. Because these people are the senior people that are going to need to write a reference for you. And when the comeback comes, it doesn't come necessarily from these men that you dealt with. Because remember, this is a system. It comes from the whole system. They will deal with you on his behalf. He's gonna walk, you can have a disciplinary hearing and he can be dismissed, he can leave, and all women will celebrate that the sex pest has left. It's fine. But believe you me, 5 years later, track where that woman is, the one who charged him. She also has been dealt with and she's been managed to exit the system. And people know that.
I'm ask you to hold it there, and I want to bring Prof in. Prof, I want you to elaborate on these mechanisms that are in place that enables the perpetrator. Let's talk about it, and then let us talk about you as somebody in this institution. How do you look, or how do we understand the need for secrecy? Doc has started on that subject, and I want you to elaborate and go into detail with it.
Okay, so I agree that there's no secrecy. That we know.
Okay.
And that we pretend not to know because of how power operates. Power punishes, and power punishes very hard. And we live in a capitalist system, and capitalism and patriarchy work together. So patriarchy, capitalism, and racism work together. So it's a system that is tight, it's a system that has been, built over time. It's a system that uses the language, our language. It uses equality, it uses freedom. So if you start a movement, 2 years later, corporate will take it on and it changes. And the reason is because this system must survive. And this system survives at the expense of human beings. And the lesser you are on that hierarchy, we trample on you. And who is the lesser human? The lesser human, in more cases than not, is the woman, and most importantly and significantly is the black woman. And here I'm talking about because black is the black woman. So if you speak out of script as a black woman, you will be punished very hard. And how do you speak out of script? You stand up and say, sexual harassment. Who the hell are you to think that you can say that about a man who is berated in the university? Because also if you look at how the university works, black women are always very junior. You are junior for a long, long time, irrespective of whether you have the qualification, irrespective of whether you have the experience. The system sees you as an inferior, irrespective of what you do. Now you have to know your place. So once you speak out of script, that's the end of you. I know of a lot of very strong black women who work very hard, who teach without complaint, who do research, who supervise students, who not only supervise students, but also support them, sponsor them. But the minute these women stand up and say, you are not gonna do this sexual harassment in front of me, you are out the door. And you are not only out of the door of that university, you are out of the door of the sector. Because it's systematic, because it's a capitalist system that works with patriarchy and racism. So black women are at the bottom. And the reason why this happens is so that to maintain this system where the ideal is a white man, he's the thinker, he's the most credible. Black women, you're not credible. Every time you stand up to speak, you are lying. We must be suspicious. We must investigate. And then the investigation goes nowhere. And then you are told, we've investigated 2 years, 3 years later, we've investigated and we have decided that you can either resign, you can live with it, but this is it. And then if you say, okay, I'm not gonna resign, I'm not gonna take it, you are not gonna be promoted. In a book that we co-author on Black Academic Voices, the South African Experience, Professor Khoza Sangase writes about her personal experience on those issues. How she was very senior, she worked very hard, she was published, she ticked all the boxes. When you come into the university system, you are told you must teach, you must supervise, you must publish, you must do administration. And she was doing all of them, ticking them, ta, ta, ta. And then because she spoke out of script, she spoke out of script, she thought she was human. Because on the hierarchy of human, black women are non-human. So she thought she was human and she spoke up. She only got promoted to professorship recently. And I'm talking about an experience that happened more than 10. When I joined this university, she was very senior. She could have been promoted to professorship, but she spoke out of script against a white woman who the university did not want to discipline because she was on the hierarchy of human, on the hierarchy of what it means to be human. She had to, because she was fighting and she stood her ground, she had to forego being a professor.
Okay. Ms. Joy, I want to bring you in now and I want to discuss, you've listened to the doctor, you've listened to the professor. Now let's talk about the enablers. Let's talk about those individuals that carry this secret. How do we understand them? those ones that benefit, that gets the promotion, those ones that go to the top level positions, you've done a research, you've conducted a research. I want you to speak to us about the enabler. Because as we sit here today, I was at another conference when somebody said that we enable patriarchy. We are the enablers because we tolerate it. We don't stand up and speak out. So I want to hear from you. How do we understand the victim that accepts this, that accepts the promotion, that is there and knows exactly what has transpired in order for her to be in the position that she is? Thank you.
Okay. I'll take it back again to what Dr. Nzi spoke about, which is a school is an extension of society. So again, the one who accepts the promotion, the one who becomes the secret bearer by keeping the secret, although most people know. I'll speak to, firstly, maybe the insights from the Eastern Cape. Eastern Cape has a lot of rural areas. It's known as one of the provinces where poverty is quite rife. Patriarchy is very, very much rife as well. Traditional practices are a norm. So from when we grow up to where we are, you are taught about tradition, where the man stands, where the woman is, and all of that, and you bear those responsibilities. And being then in the household and going into the workplace, there may be things that you may be able to censor out, but truly we still live as who we live even in the household. So the people that are victims of the power, as well as the actual victims of the sexual violations, they keep quiet because it's an expectation from society. And already, as Prof and Doc have already said, you are ostracized for speaking. As a black woman, you have many identities that you need to pass through that intersect with each other for you to get somewhere. One, we go to the workplace to work so that we can feed the community, we can feed our homes and all of that. And the Eastern Cape, as I have said, has very high unemployment rates. So if there's someone there who has, examples, recent examples, the most common ones in the basic education space is a teacher may rape children, and when it's reported, he will not be expelled. Instead, he'll be transferred elsewhere. He will continue what he was doing here. Maybe on the other side, the people's understanding of this violation is to accept the violence and move forward. And then whoever that gets placed in his place here also has accepted what has transpired, but also you're forced by the external factors that contribute to this, which is one, I need to feed my family. I have my family, my close family, but I have also an extended family that I need to feed. So I do see the problem, but I won't speak to it because I know by myself there's nothing I can do. So a lot of us keep the secret by saying there's nothing I can do, I'm by myself. So I think that how we can understand all of this, or the victimhood, and how we can understand the perpetratorship as well, because the person, yes, they're a victim by accepting, but they're also a perpetrator by accepting that, because then they are continuing the violation towards whoever the survivor is. So what we can do is try to understand it, that violation is not a linear process, first of all. There are many different things that come together for the person to experience the violence. So we need to look at the different things, and we need to work together to understand that. I heard, so it was my first time hearing today that we can't say that GBV is a pandemic in South Africa. CSVR wrote about it in 2019. We said it's a pandemic. So it was my first time finding out that actually it needs to be declared elsewhere that it's a pandemic. So such things like the normalization of language,
Yes.
that you are telling me I can't say it's a pandemic, but it's my lived reality.
Yeah.
I understand it as a pandemic because even if I move from Lusigisigi to Port St. John's,
Trauma.
I will experience the violence. It might be different because of
Yeah.
the context, but I will still continue to experience the violence. So that language where we normalize, I liked what Doc also said about the fact that if you come here and you say, "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen," there are people that you are excluding.
Yes.
We need to be open to wanting to learn. And wanting to learn means she has already spoken about it. So the next thing I can do, if I don't know how to then greet people besides saying, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," I can say everyone.
I just want you to hold that thought. I'm going to bring in Doc now, and I'm going to ask you, Doc, Ms. Joy spoke about the secrecy, keeping it a secret, etc. What are the challenges over and above what you've already said, and I want you to also come in, address us on the challenges of coming forward in the position of maybe a vice chancellor, and then address us possibly on the challenges coming forward as somebody that's in a very junior position. What are the challenges that are facing? Now we are saying a victim / perpetrator is coming to you and saying, "I have suffered this, X, Y, and Z. I've been abused, I've been blackmailed." How do you deal with it? How would you feel? How does society receive this person? How does somebody like you in your position receive this person who's now benefited, who is enabled? What are the challenges that they face?
I'm trying to get your question. So what are the challenges that people who
Keep the secret,
keep the secret, okay,
benefits
so
from the secret, but
Yeah.
now wants to come forward?
later?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So first of all, people worry that we will judge them, and we will, and we do. Because remember, some of us come from from the school of thought that you should break the silence, you should talk about this immediately. So if you enjoy 20 years of a successful career as a teacher in this school, and then you become the head of department and the deputy principal, and then you become principal, and now you say, "I know, because when I arrived here, this was happening." We're going to ask you, why were you quiet the whole time? Yeah? And you were quiet because I'm going to use this in inverted commas, you were being strategic. You knew that if you spoke out about what happened to you or what you saw, then it's not going to be good for you. So now you have risen through the system, and now you feel you do have a bit of power to talk about what happened. But sometimes we'll still judge you. But sometimes earlier on in your career, you probably did not have the same insight into the same behavior that later on you now have. So we also can't undermine the impact of our interventions. When we train people and educate people, we're giving them now the empowerment to be able to craft these encounters. And now the person is now seeing this very same encounter differently, and they are coming out. But women have been socialized to protect. Women have been socialized to protect patriarchy and perpetrators. So when they don't see it as violence, or when they don't come out about it earlier on, it is the same situation that a married woman would live in the marriage for 30 years with abuse. And then we ask them, why did you wait for so long? Right? It's because over time they probably hoped that the system will change, that there will be a policy, and then the policy comes, then the policy is not so helpful. So people are hoping in the system that things are going to change. So when they come at that point, that's the point. Also, women have been constructed as people who, as Professor Kuno says, who are not as smart. And so there's something called benevolent sexism, which is that sexism that we dispense in this context to say, we're protecting you and your image. So they've spent all their time thinking that they were protecting these victims and their image. And that is why they are only coming out later. It's because now they realize that this silence did not protect the victims because the behavior continued. And whilst we might think that they should have known, it's very difficult for a lot of people who are new in the system, first-time educator, fresh from university or college, they are probably aged 21, 22. They come here, not all of them are equipped to be able to understand the system when they arrive in the school or, when they come at the university. And the third one is the protection of the image of the institution. We have been, again, in the corporate, we've been socialized to protect the image of the institution. And this is across board, not only educational institutions, right? So imagine if we walk up to headlines that a Vodacom CEO sexually harassed someone. That's damning for Vodacom. Yeah? So all institutions, we've got to protect them. So at corporates, there's only one communications department and no one may speak to the, to the Sowetan if they don't work in the communications. So the communications person has been trained on how to reflect on the organization. The same thing in our educational institutions. We protect our schools because if we talk about rape from this school, then parents are not going to want to send their children to my school. So as the principal, I've got to protect the school. If we talk about the incidences and prevalence of sexual harassment in my university, then I'm going to be on the spotlight and the minister will be on my case, and I don't want that. So we've got to understand that we still welcome people when they come out later to report, to share their experiences and what they've seen. It is never too late to start to fight against violence against women. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that we fail to recognize sometimes is that the work that we do also must center compassion. Because there's a lot of pain that goes into some of the experiences that women who experience abuse in the home, in the workplace, go through. But again, there's also, many of us work in the institutions we work in, and that is fundamental. We need to be very clear about that. We wake up in the morning to go to work because we live in a capitalist system. And if you think about colonialism and apartheid, many of us will be homeless if we didn't work for money.
That was your 3-minute buzzer.
I only started. That's harassment.
Okay, let us stop there for a minute. I'm told by my program director that I've exhausted my time here. So I want to go on reflections and the way forward. One of the way forwards that I want you to discuss or mention is some of the legislative interventions that we can apply over and above the existing legislation. Moreover, I want you to speak a little bit about your policies within your respective institutions. And in particular, this question is directed to Doc and Professor. And then reflections from Ms. Joy. Thank you.
Okay, so in closing, I have a big challenge with legislation. And the reason is because the country has a lot of very beautiful ones. But we lack the will to implement. And one of the things that I've experienced in the past 4 years is how easy it is to get away with not implementing. Because the powers that be, the people who should hold institutions accountable, don't do it. Because of lack of political will, but also of this system that we are talking about, the capitalist system. The capitalist system forces us to ignore, to silence, to pretend like, because I need to pay my bond. So for us to see a change, and I'm gonna stop now. For us to see a change, we have to radically transform how we think and how we operate our system, our economic system. If we continue with the capitalist system, unfortunately, we will always ignore, because I need to pay school fees. I need to pay my bond. So not all of us, some of us, we suffer because we tell the truth. We speak, truth to power. And then we don't get the promotion. And then sometimes we don't even get the performance bonus. But for some of us, we are willing to forgo those things so that we can see some change. But systematically, because some of the issues we are talking about, they are systemic.
Yes.
It's not because I don't want to speak. It's that the system does not allow me to speak. So they are systemic. So the system must change.
Yeah.
So we need some radical work to change the system. Otherwise, talk shop after talk shop after talk shop.
Okay.
I think that there's something called academic freedom. And universities hide behind academic freedom when they do not want to do work that supports gender transformation. And I think that's one of the things that needs to go back to the Department of Higher Education, be legislated. The policies should come directly from there, and they should instruct universities on what to do when it comes to gender and transformation. Gender and transformation is not a nice thing to do by universities. It's not a privilege. It's not a project of an academic. It's not your research project. So we can't allow you to have academic freedom on it. It's not a teaching subject. So you have academic freedom on what you teach and what you research. You can't have academic freedom on whether or not to provide a service to women and genderqueer people in your university. Here is a small example. One day, a student came to my office. It's a woman. She had missed her graduation during her graduation season because she was having a baby. And now there was a graduation season that was coming, and she went to the faculty office to request that she then walks the stage in the upcoming graduation season. And the faculty manager and the registrar said, no, you missed your graduation. It was in the previous graduation season. No man will miss their graduation because their child is being born. So why do you need academic freedom to institute a policy across nationally in all our universities that if a student has proof that they were giving birth on the day or the week of their graduation, then their name, it's easy. You just add their name to the next graduation season. Why deny this person this opportunity when you know it is gendered? It is, there's nothing else that they can do, and it will never, ever affect men in the same way as it affects women. And the only reason why the faculty manager and the registrar and the dean said no to that student until the student came to my office because they think I'm loud on gender issues, it's because this person is a woman. If a man, believe you me, we can check now, if a man had an accident on the day of their graduation, and then they went and they wanted to be on the next list, they would be on the next list. It doesn't cost the university anything to put the name on the next list. But we punish women because instead of studying, she was busy getting pregnant here, right? So we want her to feel that you were not here to get pregnant. You were here to study. So you are going to be a good example to other girls in this university that all we want you to do when you are here is to be asexual, study your books, and then you will walk the stage. Now, as Prof. Kuno says, you were off the script. Because you were off the script, we will make sure that you feel the pain of being off the script. So we need to have laws, at least from that perspective. Gender transformation needs to be handled nationally, and all universities should have the same policies on things like pregnancy. What do we do? Some universities don't even have a pregnancy policy for when a person has missed an exam or a submission of a test because of their pregnancy. And yet they have proof that they went to the clinic for their pregnancy-related matters. And then you just miss the opportunity. It's punishment. And this is just an example on pregnancy, but we can examine all the policies of the universities on many other things that apply differently to men and women, and we'll see the same gender-blind and gender-neutral policy, even at schools. I want to use the same example in relation to schools. You know how schools would we would select the good students because 6 seconds because they all want to look good, right? No school wants to be on the newspaper for 56 pregnancies last year, and the schools want every student to go through to matric. So they systematically deselect their bad apples from this bag, right? So the bag potatoes are the ones that the principal will make sure that they don't come back to school when they have been pregnant. And again, those are the things that we need. It's easy. You look at the pregnancy rate, you look at the return to school rate according to the policy, and if there is a negative correlation between the pregnancy rate and the return to school rate, then this school should not get an award for anything in this district, because clearly they are not encouraging their young ones to return to school when they have been pregnant. So it's easy things like those that we can do.
Thank you. Can you close up for us, Ms. Joy? Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yeah,
Oh,
you
yeah.
are.
Okay, so in concluding, I want to speak to one of the, I guess, frameworks or legislations that have been in place for the basic education, which is the National School Safety Framework, which we tried to explore with our research. And some of the concluding things that we found were that educators, first of all, educators themselves are hardly trained on sexual education. They're hardly trained on how to deal with sexual and gender-based violence. And the National School Safety Framework or policy says that school stakeholders and leadership and the community as a whole have to work together to ensure safety of learners, to ensure that there is a retention of learners in school. When they do come across challenges, there's a way to work together as a community to ensure that these learners excel. But in most of the schools that we went to, we found that this is hardly applicable. So one of the critiques would be most of the legislation that we have currently or policies that we have are not well implemented. And the big reason would be budget, one. It's always at the forefront that there's no budget. So I think when we think about policies going forward, we should think of it in a comprehensive manner. How does it, we should center the human. We should always have the feminist approach as a leading way in conversating. And also, sex education is not a taboo. Sexual and gender-based violence is not a taboo. It should not be a secret to speak about it. So in schools, those are things that should be implemented where it shouldn't be a thing of Elena needs to go find a Dr. Mzi to want to speak to when they're being violated. I'm scared to tell my natural science teacher because he's also a pastor and he might say it was my fault that I was wearing a short skirt in school when I was violated. Things like that. And also, the National Safety Framework says that there needs to be a presence of police in the school to ensure that children don't become violent towards one another. But most of the time we found that that only happens after there's been something suspicious that has happened. Maybe two learners stabbed themselves. So doing such things where we only are responsive and we are not preemptive and try to prevent, we make the perpetrators or potential perpetrators already feel like criminals. Because now I'm already aware that, okay, my friend has weed and there's something that's, there are police that are coming, there are police that are coming, and we start to associate the police and ourselves as learners as criminals towards the police. So there should be an approach that we take that makes us all work together for the purpose of gender equality. I'm still hopeful that at some point we'll get to it, and I hope I'll be alive. But I think, my closing remark is that we need to find an approach that is comprehensive and that works towards not making anyone feel alienated, but it should be about togetherness. And feminist approach is not a bad thing. It actually has thought about many of these things that we're talking about today. So I would say a lot of us need to put feminism at the forefront, and we need to not make it a man and woman thing, but it's a human right thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, panelists. I'm going to agree with our panelists when they say we do have beautiful legislation. However, enforcing that legislation remains an issue in this country. I'm going to ask you, colleagues, to please hold your Q&A. I've been advised that I am out of time. We will incorporate the Q&A in the next sessions. Thank you. Okay. Colleagues, I'm advised by my CEO that we are adjourning for lunch. Thank you.